In the freezing rain on a deserted stretch of highway, Henry Flynn, single father, war veteran, and a man quietly haunted by everything he had survived, slowed his truck when he noticed something wrong beyond the guardrail. At first, it was only a flicker of red through the trees. Then he realized it was taillights, tilted at an impossible angle, half swallowed by darkness. Henry Flynn was only 36 years old, but there were nights he felt closer to 100, not the kind of tired that came from a long day's work, but the kind that settled deep into bone and memory, the kind that lived between heartbeats and surface in the quiet moments when no one was looking, when his hands trembled just slightly, or when sleep abandoned him entirely at 3 a.m. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He came home with a shoulder that never healed properly and a mind that refused to rest. Doctors called it PTSD. Henry called it ghosts. 3 years earlier, his wife Sarah had died on their daughter Audrey's 4th birthday. A brain aneurysm, sudden, merciless, with no warning at all. The hospital called while Henry was picking up her birthday cake. By the time he arrived, she was already gone. He had pulled strangers from burning vehicles in combat zones halfway across the world. He had carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire. He had kept men alive long enough to see their families again. But he couldn't save Sarah. That failure carved itself into him, so deeply it changed the way he saw everything afterward. Now it was just him and Audrey, 7 years old, with her mother's smile and a quiet habit of leaving drawings on his workbench whenever she sensed him drifting somewhere dark and unreachable. They lived in a small wooden house near the forest outside Bellingham, Washington, where rain fell more days than not, and the tall trees stood like silent witnesses to everything Henry never spoke out loud. He worked part-time as a mechanic at George Elmy's garage. George was decent enough not to ask questions on the days Henry couldn't come in. To make ends meet, Henry took night delivery runs across the county. Auto parts to small shops tucked into towns along winding back roads. It kept him moving, kept his hands busy, kept him from thinking too much. He still carried his old military knife in his pocket, still kept rescue rope coiled in the bed of his truck. Old habits, the kind that made him feel like maybe, somewhere deep down, he was still the man who used to matter. After Sarah died, Henry made himself a promise standing beside her grave. No more rescuing strangers if it meant putting Audrey at risk. She was all he had left now, the only proof that his life meant something beyond the blood, sand, and screaming that still followed him into dreams. No more heroes, just a father trying to survive one day at a time. That was why he hesitated when he saw those taillights hanging in the dark. Audrey was asleep in the back seat, wrapped in her favorite star-patterned blanket. Rain hammered against the windshield. No signal, no traffic, no witnesses. He could keep driving, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But his truck was already slowing, already pulling to the shoulder 30 meters back, already putting on hazard lights, already setting the parking brake, already breaking his promise. He checked on Audrey first, still asleep, then grabbed the rope. Flashlight, knife. The rain soaked through his jacket in seconds as he approached the edge of the cliff. The ground there was unstable, loose gravel and slick mud sliding under his boots. Below, the SUV hung half over empty space, caught on rock and roots and sheer luck. Steam hissed from the engine. Gasoline hung thick in the air. Henry anchored the rope to a concrete post and tested the tension with practiced hands. Muscle memory took over. Knots tied the same way he had tied them 100 times before. Don't do this, he muttered under his breath. Don't be the hero. But he was already climbing down. Every foothold was a gamble. When he reached the SUV, he could finally see inside. A woman in her 30s, unconscious, blood running down her temple. Her seatbelt locked tight across her chest. The vehicle shifted slightly under his weight, groaned, deciding whether to hold on or let go. Henry drew a slow breath and smashed the passenger window with his rescue hammer. Glass shattered inward, spraying across the dashboard. He reached through carefully, fingers finding the seatbelt release. Jammed. Don't move, he said, voice low and steady, even though she wasn't conscious enough to hear him. I'm Henry. I'm getting you out. He cut the belt with his knife. The SUV lurched violently. Henry wrapped his arms beneath hers, locking his grip around her torso. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2. He pulled. The woman came free just as the vehicle gave way with a metallic shriek. Henry twisted, rolling them onto solid ground as the SUV slid backward into darkness. Seconds later, explosion. Orange fire erupted below, reflecting in the rain. Henry didn't let go. His shoulder screamed where he had wrenched it, but she was alive, breathing. That was all that mattered. No signal meant no ambulance. The storm had taken out lines somewhere along the mountain. He checked her pupils, uneven but responsive. Possible concussion. She needed a hospital, but hypothermia would kill her first. His house was 10 minutes away, closer than anything else. Henry wrapped her in his jacket and carried her back to the truck, laying her carefully across the front seat. Audrey stirred but didn't wake. He drove through the storm with white-knuckled hands on the wheel, praying he had made the right choice. When Rosalind Hart woke up, she didn't know where she was. The room was small, warm, and softly lit by the orange glow of a wood stove crackling in the corner. Her head throbbed in a slow, pulsing rhythm, and when she lifted a hand to touch her temple, she felt clean gauze wrapped around it. She smelled soup, chicken, and herbs. Something simple, something safe. An old military jacket hung drying near the fire. On the wall above it was a framed certificate from the Department of Defense, and beside it, a photograph of a man in uniform standing beside a smiling woman holding a baby. "You're awake." The voice came from the doorway. Henry stood there holding a mug, his expression tired but careful. "You're in my house," he said. "Storm's got the roads closed. You're safe." She tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her skull. "Easy," he said, setting the mug down nearby. "You hit your head pretty hard. Stay still." That's when she noticed a little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring with intense concentration. Dark ponytail, serious eyes. The child looked up and smiled shyly. "Hi," she said. "I'm Audrey. Daddy said you had an accident." Something inside Rosalind's chest cracked open. This wasn't a hospital. This was someone's home. Someone who had climbed down into the rain and darkness and pulled her out of a burning vehicle and expected nothing in return. "Thank you," she whispered. The words felt impossibly small. Henry only nodded. Over the next day, the storm kept them isolated. Rosalind moved slowly around the house. Once she was steady enough, helping where she could. She learned how to stack wood beside the stove and helped Audrey fold paper airplanes, carefully following the girl's precise instructions on where to crease and how to shape the wings. They named the first one Hope 1. It flew crooked, but it flew. Henry watched from a distance, always quiet, always alert. She noticed the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking, the way he stood at the window sometimes, staring into the rain like he was somewhere else entirely, the way Audrey would gently touch his arm and bring him back without saying a word. Late that night, unable to sleep, Rosalind found him sitting on the porch, watching the rain. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and sat beside him. "I used to save people," Henry said after a long silence. "That was my job, and I was good at it." He paused. "But I couldn't save my wife." Rosalind didn't say she was sorry. She knew that wouldn't help. Instead, she stayed. By Monday morning, the roads had cleared just enough for travel. Henry was loading the truck when the radio crackled to life. Local authorities were investigating a vehicle fire on Highway 20 near mile marker 73. Documents belonging to Hart Technologies had been recovered from the scene, raising questions about corporate espionage. Rosalind's face went pale. Before either of them could speak, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. 2 deputies stepped out. Polite, professional, but firm. They had tracked Henry's license plate from traffic cameras. They had questions. At the station, the situation changed quickly. Clinton Reeves, fearful of what might surface, had already begun leaking stories to friendly reporters. By evening, Henry wasn't arrested, but he wasn't free to leave either. Audrey stayed with George's wife. Rosalind sat alone in Henry's house, staring at the briefcase he had pulled from the wreckage without opening. He had saved her life, and now he was paying for it. She couldn't let that happen. At 7 that evening, Still wearing Henry's spare clothes, Rosalind walked into the police station. "I'm Rosalind Hart," she told the detective in charge. "The victim." Chaos followed. Her father was called. Clinton was called. Lawyers arrived. Media trucks lined the street outside, across an interrogation table. She told Henry everything. The accident, the anonymous letter accusing Clinton of fraud, the evidence hidden in the briefcase. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "I did." Clinton moved fast. Private investigators dug into Henry's past. His PTSD, his medication, an old incident at the garage where he had restrained an aggressive customer. Every piece of trauma became ammunition. Articles painted him as volatile, dangerous, unreliable. But Rosalind had spent 15 years in public relations. She knew how to follow a narrative back to its source. Her search led to Archibald Wayne, a senior procurement officer terrified of losing everything. He had sent the anonymous letter. Clinton had been forcing him to sign off on falsified invoices for months. They arranged to meet in a parking garage. Archibald hesitated, until two men stepped from a car and grabbed for Rosalind's bag containing copied evidence. Henry stepped from the shadows. He had followed her. The fight was fast and brutal. Pain shot through his injured shoulder, but he moved anyway, driving an elbow into one attacker, sweeping the legs of the other. They ran. Henry didn't chase them. He got Rosalind out instead. "I'm not letting anything bad happen in front of me again," he said roughly. Archibald gave them everything. Emails, financial records, names, enough to bring Clinton down. Rosalind scheduled a press conference for Friday afternoon. Clinton responded by leaking Henry's psychiatric records to tabloids and hiring agitators to disrupt the event. The hall filled with reporters. Rosalind took the microphone. "For 15 years, she began, I've managed images. Today, I'm telling the truth." Smoke grenades went off halfway through. Panic erupted. People shoved toward exits. Alarms blared. One of Clinton's hired men lunged for her laptop. Henry intercepted him with a clean wrist lock and sent him to the floor. Police flooded in moments later. Clinton was arrested that night. The evidence was overwhelming. Weeks passed. The media storm faded. Henry returned to the garage. Rosalind remained at Hart Technologies, helping implement new oversight policies. Audrey made a second airplane. Hope 2. "It flies farther," she said proudly. They tested it together in the field behind the house. Henry watched from the porch, something softer in his expression than there had been in years. That evening, after Audrey slept, Rosalind stayed. "You saved me from more than the cliff," she said quietly. Henry shook his head. "You saved yourself. I was just there." Their hands found each other in the quiet space between them. 6 months later, Rosalind launched the Unseen Courage Foundation, providing PTSD treatment, housing assistance, and job training for veterans transitioning to civilian life. Henry joined as a community safety advisor, teaching emergency response workshops. It wasn't therapy, but it was healing. On a Sunday afternoon in late spring, they stood together in the same field, Henry, Rosalind, and Audrey, holding a new fleet of paper airplanes. Hope 3, Hope 4, Hope 5. "Ready?" Audrey asked. They launched them all at once. Some dipped immediately. Some caught the wind and soared higher than any of them had alone. Later, driving home with Audrey singing off-key in the back seat and Rosalind's hand warm in his, Henry felt something he had thought was gone forever. Not happiness. Something deeper. Peace. The house came into view, lights glowing softly through the rain. Above the front door hung Hope 1 and Hope 2, protected beneath the eaves. Every time Henry came home now, he saw them, a reminder that even fragile things, if held carefully, could survive the storm. And for the first time in 3 years, when he closed his eyes, he didn't see a hospital room. He saw paper airplanes flying through sunlight. He saw his daughter smile. He saw a future he didn't have to face alone. Outside, the rain fell gently on the roof. Inside, 3 people who survived their own separate storms learned what it meant to be each other's shelter. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole in the ways that mattered most. The light stayed on all night, warm, steady, unwavering, a beacon promising that even in the darkest storms, somewhere there is shelter, somewhere there is home, and somewhere there is always hope.